This video is brought to you by AKSIAS.
Welcome to Economy Weekly Roundup at AKSIAS. Today, the first topic under Economy Weekly Roundup is Agriculture Infrastructure Fund. This is part of 20 lakh package announced by the central government to initiate measures to uplift the economy post-COVID. So what is this Agriculture Fund is all about? Union Cabinet has given approval to a Pan-India Central Sector Scheme. Pan-India Central Sector Scheme, and what was the object of this scheme? To provide formal credit into farm and farm processing sector. Agriculture post-COVID requires immediate credit availability to initiate cultivation. It needs working capital. So, for that extent, this program is very helpful to revive agriculture. What was the details of this program? It is a part of over 20 lakh crore. Just now I told you that. And the Union Cabinet has approved amendment to Essential Commodities Act. Why this act was amended? Economic Survey has given a specific chapter about unnecessary government interventions, and one of the unnecessary government interventions was through Essential Commodities Act. So, government want to amend this act to enable investment and in agriculture. What was the objective? Just now I told you that to provide credit to agriculture. To meet what? To provide medium long-term debt financing for investment in viable projects for post-harvest management, infrastructure and community farming assets. So you have to infuse credit facilities in setting up post-harvest management facilities. In other words, it is speaking about processing also. Next, the funds will be provided for what are the various avenues that are utilized under harvesting. First one is cold storage and food processing chains, warehousing, silos, assaying, grading, packaging units, e-marketing points. Try to understand all this is related to what? Food processing infrastructure, which is inadequate as of now in India. Now, under this, government want to invest not only in short-term requirements but also in long-term and medium-term requirements by identifying various food processing infrastructure, and it is now providing credit to establish all these things. Next one. On a PPP, projects for crop aggregation, public-private partnership, and sponsored by central, state, local bodies, and the duration is, this is important for preliminary examination. Any program, three important things: beneficiaries, duration and sharing. If any program is initiated by the central government, there will be sharing of funding pattern between center, states, UTs, with assemblies and without assemblies, etc. So, the duration of the period is 2020 to 29. Next, what are the features of this Agriculture Infrastructure Fund? The first one is financial support. Just now I told you that the object itself is providing financial support to the farming. 1 lakh crore will be provided. Provided to who? To primary agriculture credit societies. What is a primary agriculture credit societies? This PACS, Primary Agriculture Credit Society, it is at the lowest grassroots level in cooperative banking. Try to recollect the content you have read in cooperative banking. State cooperative banks, district central cooperative banks, and then comes your primary agriculture societies. So it want to provide loan facilities to the grassroots level cooperative banking structure, which is catering to the needs of rural people. Then marketing cooperative societies, FPOs, farmer producer organizations, self-help groups, farmers, joint liability groups, multi-purpose cooperative societies and agricultural entrepreneurs. That means it is also providing loan facility to private operators. Agri-entrepreneurs are nothing but private people who are into agri-related business. Why this huge investment, or why this huge 1 lakh crore loan is being provided? Now it want to revive agriculture activities and processing units into a wholesome activity. That was the objective behind providing so much of a huge amount of loan. Next, the central state agencies or local bodies are sponsored by public-private partnership projects. So this is undertaken through the mode of PPP. Next, the loans will be disbursed in 4 years and sanction of 10,000 crore in the current year. Out of 1 lakh, 10,000 will be given in 2021. From thereafter, 30,000 in each next 3 financial years. So now it is 10,000 crore in 2020-21. In 2022, it is 30,000 crore. Likewise, for the next 3 years, the total amount given from 2021 to 24-25 will be 1 lakh crore rupees. Then, moratorium for repayment. What do you mean by moratorium for repayment? Post-COVID, Reserve Bank of India has given a facility to borrowers who has to repay their loans to the banks and other financial agencies. There was a moratorium. That means a time break was given to repay the loans. The moratorium for repayments may vary subject to minimum of 6 months and maximum of 2 years. So this is about duration of repayment. Next one, interest subvention. What is interest subvention? Government will pay a part of interest. That is called interest subvention scheme. Just for example, the loans will have interest subvention of 3%, right? Per annum up to a limit of 2 crore. Say if the interest is around 5%, when the government said the loans will have interest subvention of 3%, actual borrower have to pay 2% and 3% of interest will be paid by government. So this 3% is called interest subvention. Per annum up to the limit was 2 crore. This subvention will be available for a maximum period of 7 years. What is this maximum period of 7 years? Whenever interest subvention is announced by the government, the objective is to encourage prompt repayment. To encourage prompt repayment. This is the objective behind announcing interest subvention. Next, the scheme like credit guarantee coverage will be available for eligible borrowers from the scheme under credit guarantee fund trust. Credit guarantee fund trust for micro and small enterprises, and the loan amount is 2 crore. So again, one more scheme, farmer producer organizations, in case of FPOs, the credit guarantee may be availed from the facility under farmer producers organization promotion scheme. For every identified beneficiary under this 1 lakh crore loan facility, government is providing an avenue to access the credit. Next one, how does the fund manage? The fund will be managed and monitored through an online mechanism. What is that online mechanism? Management information system. And what is the advantage of this management information system? It will enable all the qualified entities to apply for the loan. Had it not been for online platform to apply for the loan, whenever people have to apply offline physically, that is a scope for corruption. So now the government has also addressed that issue and it has adopted management information system to apply for the loan under this program. Next one, the national, state and district level monitoring committees will be set up to monitor the implementation of the program. So this is about agriculture infrastructure fund. Next topic is fall in service purchasing managers index. What is this purchasing managers index? We have index of industrial production in India, which measures core sector industrial performance starting with fertilizer, crude, cement, electricity, refined oil products, etc., cement, etc. So likewise, purchasing managers index will have 3 indexes. First one is an index related to manufacturing. Second one is an index related to service. Third one is an index which is a combination of both manufacturing and services, that is called composite index. So this is given by an agency located or based in London. The agency's name is IHS Markit. Don't mistake the spelling. The spelling is absolutely right. The agency is IHS Markit India Service Business Activity Index. Purchasing Managers Index has observed the contraction of services. So this Purchasing Managers Index will observe the pace at which manufacturing and services are growing in any country. This IHS market is nothing but a global financial information providing agency. It studies economies across the globe, and based on that it provides its indexes. It studies whether the existing pace of growth is continuing, or it being contracted, or it is being maintained status quo. Based on the information provided by this IHS market, countries across the globe, they make their decisions, they change their policies. So the way we use IIP, Index of Industrial Production data, to change our policies, likewise many countries globally, they use the information provided by this IHS market service to change their policy decisions. So it holds some significance. Now try to understand. It has observed the contraction of services. This is very important. Why contraction of services? Because of COVID-19, all businesses were shut down. When businesses were shut down, there is no consumption. When there is no consumption, there is no business activity. When both consumption and business activity were absent, how can service sector increase? So generally, because of COVID, services sector contracted. That was given by this purchasing managers index. And what was the period? Contraction of services sector activity for the 4th consecutive month in June. Economic Survey has also mentioned this point in January 2020. It said, according to Purchasing Managers Index, services sector is slightly sliding down. And this further reinstates the apprehension raised by Economic Survey in 2020 January. Now what does this say? For the 4th consecutive month in June 2020, that means you start with February, March, April, May, it was contracted. Next, India's service sector activity remained in deep downturn in June. Just now I explained why it was sliding down. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic curtailed intakes of new work orders and disrupted business operations. See, not only service sector, everything came to a halt because of COVID. By the way, why we have to study the impact of COVID or any other stagnation or any other pandemic and its impact on service sector? Even Purchasing Managers Index also discussed at length about impact of COVID on service sector in India. Two important reasons. One, service sector contributes somewhere around 35 to 38% of India's exports. Very important in balance of payments context. Second important context, more than 50%, to be precise, somewhere around 56 to 57% was the contribution of service sector to India's GDP. So because of these two reasons, service sector is very, very significant for Indian economy. Now, the index is compiled by, this is important for prelims, which of the following agencies compiles a Purchasing Managers Index? That can be a question. So it was compiled by IHS market for more than 40 economies worldwide. And this is the description about IHS market. Just now I told you that it's a global leader in information, analytics and solutions for the major industries and markets that drive economies worldwide. So it provides information on global financial issues around. Next, what is this Purchasing Managers Index? Just now I told you that it is an index of the prevailing direction. That means whatever the direction in which industries, manufacturing and service sector are passing through. Prevailing direction of economic trends in the manufacturing and service sector. It only studies manufacturing and economic services, service sector. So what is the service sector? What does the information that we can understand from Purchasing Managers Index? It summarizes whether market conditions in any country. So Purchasing Managers Index summarizes whether market conditions in a particular country as viewed by purchasing managers are expanding. This is very important. First one is either market conditions are expanding. Second one, staying the same means maintaining status quo, or contracting. At the beginning of the topic, it said that there was a contraction in service sector as observed by Purchasing Managers Index for the fourth consecutive month in June 2020. I have also told you that economic survey has also discussed about contraction of service sector. Now, the purpose of the Purchasing Managers Index is, just now I told you that, to provide information so that policy makers will change their decisions. Provide information about current and future business conditions to company decision makers, analysts and investors. So, not only policy makers, company heads and other important decision makers in the business world, they can change their decisions based on the information provided by Purchasing Managers Index. Next, it is different from Index of Industrial Production. Why? In India, we rely more on Index of Industrial Production, IIP. Last week's session also I have discussed about among 8 core sector industries in IIP, only fertilizer sector has witnessed revival and it has registered some positive growth. And service sector was the hardest hit sector among 8 core industries which have registered 42% of negative growth. So, we rely more on IIP rather than Purchasing Managers Index in India. See how they are different, which also gauges the level of activity in the economy. Yes, IIP calculates how manufacturing and industry sector are performing in the economy. Now, IIP covers broader industrial sector. This is the advantage compared with Purchasing Managers Index. What is the drawback? Purchasing Managers Index is more dynamic compared to a standard industrial production index. So, Purchasing Managers Index, it is more dynamic. It includes n number of factors to come to a conclusion whether market conditions are stagnant or growing or decelerating. So, this is the difference between IIP and PMI. These two statements can be twisted and can be asked in preliminary examination. Next one. So, just now I have provided that servicing challenges. Anything less than 50 in PMI index, anything less than 50 in PMI index is considered as a bad sign. See here, revival is happening. This red line belongs to Service Purchasing Managers Index. So, revival is happening. See, in April, it is just 5.4. Service sector value is 5.4 in Purchasing Managers Index in April 2020. Slowly, from June 1st, lockdown was lifted partially. So, gradually service sector started picking up. From 5.4 to the value increased to 33.7. That means there is a clear, sure sign of improvement as far as service sector is concerned. But the improvement is not good enough to register growth. Why? Because it is less than 50. Now, this blue line is about composite PMI. Composite PMI means both manufacturing services put together. What was this blue line? Somewhere near 39, right? This value is somewhere near 39. So, both composite PMI and service PMI, they are less than 50. That means still there is huge scope and still there is need to revive the economy both in service sector front and manufacturing front. So, this is about the pictographic diagram. Next one, the current scenario in service sector. It says that in June it rose to 33.7. This value you have seen just now in the picture. From 12.6 in May, and see, it was 12.6 in May, but what was the value in April? Somewhere around 5.6. So, from 5.6 to 12.6 and 12.6 to 37.7, slowly service sector is picking up in India. It is indicating a pickup from the previous month of any reading below 50. I told you this, any reading below 50 on this survey shows contraction. So, even today, if you are asked to understand whether there is contraction or growth in service sector, we have to say it is still in contraction phase. Now, index stood at record low of 5.4 in April. Just now we have discussed this. India's services sector activity reported the slower rate of decline, which is reflective of some stabilization in activity levels. Then, however, the closures and temporary suspensions are responsible for the stabilization in service activities. It has given the reasons why closures and temporary suspensions. Why temporary suspensions and why closures? Because of COVID, as simple as that. Next one. Additionally, 59% of firms reported no change in output. What do you mean by this? They have maintained status quo, neither sliding down nor increasing. No growth, no deceleration. Meanwhile, only 4% registered growth, and while 37% recorded reduction. This is the reason why we say still service sector in India is still in a contraction stage. Next, reasons for contraction. Sharp fall in total new orders due to reduced consumption habits. Why consumption habits reduced? Because of lockdown, because of no business activity, because people are not coming out of their homes. That was the reason behind reduced consumption. Because of reduced consumption, there were no new orders. Next, closure of businesses due to unfavorable environment. Not only in India, entire globe, there was a slowdown. Nobody is coming out. Business is not as usual. Consumption is not as usual. So naturally, it will have its impact on service sector. Steep drop in export sales. Who will export goods from any other country? When COVID is presumed to be spreading through transportation of people, goods, services, whatever it is, people are not accepting orders within the country. I'll give an example. Amazon, Flipkart, all these e-commerce players, they stopped taking orders and delivering goods. Why? COVID may be spread through transportation and delivery of goods also. When such conditions are prevailing, why would anyone export goods from any other country when every country is being affected by coronavirus? That is the reason. Next one. Job losses due to lower business requirements. Most of the companies, even in India, we have seen people losing their jobs because of COVID. Next, poor staff availability. Whatever staff that were retained in the companies, in the offices, their abilities were compromised. Now, significance of service sector. Just now, at the beginning of the topic itself, I told you why service sector is very important for Indian economy. See, around 2/3 of total foreign direct investment inflows into India. FDI comes majorly into service sector. 38% of India's exports are from service sector. And you look at the GDP contribution of service sector. Service sector contribution is 57% in GDP. That is why it is very, very important. So this is about a composite purchasing managers index output. What does the composite index says? It is nothing but it measures combined services and manufacturing output. Slowly it has also increased. I have shown you on the graph that it is somewhere near 39%. So it rose to 37.8% in June. This is a good sign, but 37.8 is still below the crucial 50 level, signifying contraction. Now the PMI for manufacturing, I told you that it has got 3 indexes. One is for service, one is for manufacturing, one is for both service and manufacturing put together called composite. Now the PMI for manufacturing has also been released, which is at 42.7, signifying moderate fall in manufacturing production. So the fall is not drastic, the fall is moderate. Very soon it may be revived. Now what is the way forward? Although the deterioration was weaker than in April, see, you observe March, April, May, June. In these 3 months, yes, when the lockdown was announced, everything including manufacturing services, they witnessed sliding down. Slowly after lockdown was lifted, these sectors are picking up. Last week I told you that fertilizer sector witnessed growth. What was the reason? Because government has allowed agriculture activities. That led to increase in demand of fertilizer. That led to revival of fertilizer as a part of index of industrial production. So slowly revival is happening. The latest reduction was stronger than seen prior to the virus outbreak by a wide margin. So this is about this topic. Thus the business confidence needs to be developed to uplift expectations of services. How does business confidence is revived by the governments? Try to understand this point. Always business confidence is revived through enabling stability in the economy. Try to understand the economic condition in India before announcing a 20 lakh package for the revival of economy because of COVID. Before the package was announced, the business confidence was very low and the situation was very bleak in India. Once the package was announced, the business confidence picked up, but that means business environment was picked up because of positive infusion of stimulus package announced by the government. So that package will keep this business confidence on high and it will uplift the expectations of service sector activities. Generally, once the business activity is picked up, service sector will also picked up. So this is about purchasing managers index and its insights on services, manufacturing and composite index in India. Next topic is Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, FCRA. Why this was in news? I just want you to understand this is part of money laundering and this is part of how NGOs registered under Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, they receive funds. What are the regulations imposed by the government? Which ministry oversees this Foreign Contribution Regulation Act? And what is the situation of NGOs in India? Just for the preliminary point of view, try to understand this topic. Minister of Home Affairs looks after Foreign Contributions Act in India, has constituted an inter-ministerial committee. Why? There was allegations on Rajiv Gandhi Trust and Indira Gandhi Trust about receiving funding from Chinese companies. So to look into the issue, the government has constituted inter-ministerial committee to coordinate investigations into violations of various legal provisions of Prevention of Money Laundering Act, Income Tax Act and Foreign Contribution Regulating Act, etc. by Rajiv Gandhi Foundation, Rajiv Gandhi Charitable Trust, Indira Gandhi Memorial Trust. So keep aside politics, try to understand technically from the examination point of view. How does this act is implemented in India? Any NGO, if it want to receive donation from foreign countries, it must get itself registered with the Ministry of Home Affairs website under Foreign Contributions Regulation Act. Then all these NGOs have been receiving donations. So this is about not important, politically it is not important for us, and implemented by Ministry of Home Affairs. This sentence is important for preliminary examination. Under this act, organizations need to register themselves every 5 years. That was a condition. Next one. As per the amended Foreign Contributions Regulation Act rules, all NGOs registered or granted prior permissions. Before these amendments, they used to file their contributions and reports every year once. Now, they were mandated to file their contributions and related information once in every 3 months. This is the important change brought into this act by the changing rules. See, FCRA are now required to upload details of foreign contributions received and utilized by them every 3 months. Before that, it was every year only once on their website or the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act website. NGOs now need to file their annual returns online. Now they do not have to provide physical copy, only online, but the annual returns must be placed quarterly. Quarterly means 3 months once on the NGOs, on their website or the website maintained by Home Ministry. So this is the rule. Next one, who can accept foreign contribution? I have given you the list of who are eligible or who can accept foreign contribution, who cannot accept foreign contribution. Now see eligibility criteria. A person having a definite cultural, economic, educational, religious, social program can accept foreign contribution, of course after getting permission from Ministry of Home Affairs. Why so much of hue and cry against Foreign Contribution Regulation Act? I'll give an example. Whenever India enters into agreement in nuclear reactors trade, this happened in the past, a decade ago. Whenever work is initiated to construct a nuclear reactor with collaboration with Russia, those NGOs funded by America used to protest in the site of a nuclear reactor construction and vice versa. Next, association or company engaged in production and broadcast of audio news, audio visual news, current affairs programs, etc. This is about electronic media. This eighth point is very, very important. Try to understand the details from this point. Any other individuals or associations who have been specifically prohibited by the central government. That means if apart from these 7 people or 7 groups, central government is having powers to identify any individual or organization or agency, and it can prevent them from receiving foreign contribution. Next, what is the eligibility criteria for grant of registration? The association must be registered. There are 3 avenues for registration. It can be a registered association under Societies Registration Act 1860, or it can be a registered organization under Indian Trust Act 1882, or under Section 8 of Companies Act 2013. If the organization is registered under any of these 3, it is eligible to accept foreign contribution. Next, normally they will be in existence for at least 3 years and has undertaken reasonable activity in this field, the benefit of the society. That means, say for example, an NGO was set up to provide free education to the poor. So, if it applies for getting access to foreign contribution, at least it must have spent 10 lakh rupees on providing free education to the poor. At least it must be in that education field for a reasonable period of time, at least for 3 years. Only then it will receive permission from the government to receive foreign funding. Then what is public interest? This is very difficult to define. According to Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, the receipt of funding from sources outside of India to NGOs working in India, it prohibits the receipt of foreign contribution for any activities detrimental to the national interest. If there is no specific definition of what constitutes public interest, it is very difficult to prove in the court of law that whatever an organization or an NGO is doing, it is against the interest of the nation. When there is no clear-cut definition, it will be very difficult to prove your own intention in the court of law. The Act specifies that NGOs require the government's permission to receive funding from abroad. Then, after receiving funding, the government can refuse permission if it believes that the donation will adversely affect public interest or the economic interest of the state. This will happen only when government initiates any infrastructure project in the name of conservation and protection of environment. All kinds of NGOs gather at the site of construction, be it a power project, dedicated freight corridor, railway line, whatever it is, or a port. Whenever infrastructure projects are initiated by the government, you see people protesting to save the environment. Most of the times there will be a foreign hand behind their protest. So that is why government is bringing a lot of necessary rules to address that menace. Now this condition is manifestly overboard. Why? Because it is very difficult to prove what is public interest. There is no clear guidance on what constitutes a public interest. Now definition of foreign contribution. It defines foreign contribution means in what means a foreign country can contribute to support an NGO in India. In what ways? Through cash, gold, securities. Let us see. Foreign contribution includes currency, articles other than gift for personal use, and securities received from foreign source. So, not only money, articles other than personal gifts and securities, these 3 constitute foreign contribution. While foreign hospitality refers to arranging for foreign travel, hospitality there, etc. Lodging, transportation, medical treatment. Next one. So this is how it operates. Try to understand. I said a person who is eligible to receive foreign contribution. When I say person, it is not a literal meaning of the person. It can be any individual, it can be a Hindu undivided family, it can be association, or it can be a non-profit organization. Next, what happened after 2017? In 2019 alone, more than 1800 NGOs lost their license to receive foreign funding. Why? Because government found that these NGOs, they are not working according to their own intention, and instead they are working to the interest of their foreign contributors. NGOs. Next, there should be better coordination between ministries of home affairs and finance ministry in terms of monitoring and regulating illicit and unaccounted funds. So both ministries should work in cooperation. A regulatory mechanism to keep a watch on the financial activities of NGOs and voluntary organizations is the need of the hour. Just like we have regulatory bodies for markets, banks, etc., we need to have a regulatory mechanism to keep a watch on NGOs and voluntary organizations. Next one, citizens today are keen to play. That means enable citizens to play active role in understanding and in determining the intentions of NGOs that are working in India. This is how you address this menace. Next topic is a scheme for formalization of micro food processing enterprises. This was announced by the government recently. The government has launched the scheme called Pradhan Mantri Formalization of Micro Food Enterprises. Pradhan Mantri Formalization of Micro Food Enterprises. Now, the Union Cabinet has given its approval to this scheme. And why this scheme? Most of the micro food enterprises in India are in unorganized or informal sector. So it want to uplift those unorganized sector where all these micro food processing enterprises are located. That was the intention. What are the objectives of this program? Increases access to finance. This is the utmost important requirement of micro food enterprises which are in unorganized sector in India. See, what is the difference between any enterprise in organized sector and enterprise in unorganized sector? Their access to credit will become difficult if you are in unorganized sector. So to address the financial needs of micro food enterprises which are in unorganized sector in India, the government has initiated access to finance by micro food processing units. If their financial strength is improved, their contribution to the economy will be improved. And don't forget that these enterprises, they offer huge scope for employment in rural areas. Next one, enhanced compliance with food quality and safety standards. What is the advantage of this point? If you are not compromising on quality and safety standards, that means whatever food processed by these micro food enterprises, it will meet the standards of global food products. That means it will improve exports of food from these micro food enterprises to other countries. This can add value to your exports. Next, strengthening capacities of support systems. Next one, the transition from unorganized sector to the formal sector. Once a micro food enterprise which is in unorganized sector, if assisted by financial assistance from the government, if it is enabled to follow quality standards and global safety procedures, then it may improve its position from an organization or an enterprise in an unorganized sector to organized sector. That means there will be an upliftment from the organized sector to unorganized sector. Sorry, upliftment from unorganized sector to organized sector. This is advantage. Next one, special focus on women entrepreneurs and aspirational districts. Why this special focus was on women entrepreneurs? Most of the micro food enterprises in India, in villages, they are owned by women. Next one, encourage waste to wealth activities. What is the reason behind food processing? You take perishables. Without processing, the wastage of agriculture commodities is so high. So to prevent agriculture product from wastage, you want to process them. So focus is on waste to wealth activities and also focus on minor forest produce in tribal districts. This is how you uplift the lives of people who are living in these tribal areas. Next one, what are the salient features of this program? Centrally sponsored expenditure to be shared by center and states. 60% will be contributed by the central government, 40% will be contributed by state government. 2 lakh micro enterprises are to be assisted with credit linked subsidy. Not only credit will be given, along with that there will be subsidy. For example, if the subsidy is 1 lakh and the loan amount is 10 lakhs. So if you take the loan of 10 lakhs from a bank, you have to repay 9 lakhs. Why? the 1 lakh is subsidy. The 1 lakh will be paid by the government on behalf of you. So subsidy. Micro enterprises will get credit linked subsidy at 35%. This is very important of eligible project cost with ceiling of 10 lakhs. What is 35% of 10 lakhs? That means 3,50,000 will be given as a subsidy under this program. Next, beneficiary contribution will be minimum 10%. Say for example, you want to take the loan of 10 lakhs. 10% means 1 lakh must be from your pocket, 3.5 lakhs will be subsidy, and you get loan of 9 lakhs. Try to imagine almost 40% is being provided to the beneficiary in the form of subsidy by the government. Nearly 3,50,000 if the loan amount is 10 lakhs. And balance from the loan, seed capital means working capital, will be given to self-help groups. That means 4 lakh per self-help group for loan to members for working capital and small tools. This is to initiate any business. Next, cluster approach will be followed and focus is on perishables. Who will implement? An interministerial empowered committee under the chairmanship of Food Processing and Industries Minister will be monitoring the program. What about state level monitoring? At the state level, there will be a committee headed by Chief Secretary. And how does the action plan begins? States will formulate plans and center will approve their plans. See, Chief Secretary will monitor and sanction. Then they will recommend proposals for expansion of micro units and setting up of new units by self-help groups. Then states will prepare annual action plans for implementation of the scheme and approved by the central government. Then the third party evaluation of midterm review mechanism would be built in the program. So to see the efficacy of the program and to evaluate whether the program is moving on the expected and desired lines, there will be a third party evaluation of the program. This is very, very important to understand the impact of government's intervention. National level portal would be set up wherein applicants or individual enterprise could apply to participate in the scheme, and all these schemes activities are undertaken on the national portal. Next one, what are the benefits of the scheme? Nearly 8 lakh micro enterprises will benefit through access to information, better exposure and formalization. See the huge quantity of micro food enterprises situated in India. 8 lakh micro enterprises located in India will be benefited by because of this formalization program. It will enable them to formalize, grow and become competitive. The project is likely to generate 9 lakh skilled and semi-skilled jobs. Already this sector, unorganized sector, is contributing to address unemployment problem in India. More than 45% of employment opportunities in India are provided by unorganized sector. Next, the fourth advantage, scheme envisages increased access to credit by existing micro food processing entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in the aspirational districts. Then a better integration with organized markets. What is the advantage of integration with organized markets? Two advantages. One, the reach of consumer base expands. Second one, it will instill a sense of competitiveness to match other quality based products available in the market. See, when you are producing a food processing product which is in inferior quality, you cannot compete in the open market. So naturally, by getting access to organized market, you will try to improve your own standards and you will address your quality issues. And by doing so, you start producing a better quality product. Better integration with organized markets, increased access to common services. Increased access to common services. What are the common services? Grading, sorting, processing, packaging, branding, storaging, etc. Now, why we need this scheme? There are about 25 lakh unregistered food processing enterprises which constitutes 98% of the sector and are unorganized and informal. Because of this, we need this formalization scheme. Nearly 66% of these units are located in rural areas and about 80% of them are family-based enterprises. At the beginning of the topic, I said that for rural economy to revive, This is the best way to revive rural economy. Why? It will address empowerment of women. It will address issues in tribal areas. It will address issues in aspirational districts. It will address issues in rural development. So these micro food processing units located in rural areas, if you uplift them, it will solve many of the problems faced by India today. This sector faces a number of challenges, including what are the challenges faced by these sectors? That means first one is they are denied access to formal credit. That will be the first problem or first challenge. Their inability to access credit, high cost of institutional borrowing, lack of access to modern technology, inability to integrate with the food supply chain and compliance with the health and safety standards. What is the drawback of this last point? If they are not following health and safety standards, they cannot compete in the open market. They cannot export their products. That is a disadvantage. Next. Strengthening this segment will lead to reduction in wastage, creation of off-farm job opportunities and aid in achieving the government objective of doubling farmers' income by 2022. So you revive food processing units at grassroots level, that is at village level. Two advantages. One, it will provide employment opportunities. It will add revenue to the farmer and it will double its income. Next topic is World Bank's support to India for micro, small, medium enterprises. Because of COVID and its impact on Indian economy, World Bank came forward and it pledged to provide loan facility to India, and this loan facility will be used by Indian government to revive micro, small, medium enterprises and to revive the existing liquidity position of NBFCs and small finance banks. Why? Because through these two institutions like NBFCs, non-banking finance companies and small finance banks, micro, small, medium enterprises, they get lending. So let us look into this issue. Why it is in news? Recently World Bank and the government of India signed $750 million agreement for an emergency response program for micro, small, medium enterprises. Emergency response program, and these programs are dedicated towards enhancing the resilience of communities. How do you enhance resilience of communities? By empowering them with financial packages during disasters, etc. Resilience of communities and livelihoods in order to address fragility, poverty, vulnerability to conflict and disaster. What is a conflict and disaster these days? Pandemic, that is called COVID. Next. So how does this program works? The US, that means $750 million American dollars loan which is being granted from the bank for reconstruction and development. This is an agency in the World Bank group. World Bank is not a single bank, it is a conglomeration of few banks or few agencies, and International Bank for Reconstruction and Development is one of the agencies under World Bank group. So a part of World Bank group has a maturity of 19 years and some grace period of 5 years. So today you have taken the loan, the repayment is made after 24 years. So this is the advantage of this loan. Next, the World Bank groups and its private sector arm, International Finance Corporation, will support the government's initiatives to protect micro, small, medium enterprise sector which is severely impacted by COVID-19 crisis. And this pandemic has severely impacted MSME sector, leading to simple loss of livelihoods and employment. Earlier, the World Bank has committed to support India's emergency COVID-19 response. Already it has pledged to extend some loan amount, including the new MSME project with 2.75 billion. So the first emergency support was announced in April 2020 for immediate support to India's health sector. This was for health sector. Now this is for micro, small, medium enterprises. So at two levels, under two different loan facilities, World Bank has come to the rescue of India. Next, another $1 billion project was approved in May to increase cash transfers and food benefits to the poor and vulnerable, including a more consolidated delivery platform which is accessible to both rural and urban populations. So this is a third promise made by World Bank Group. Next one. Significance. Why this loan amount or this loan schemes by World Bank is crucial for India? Unlocking liquidity. I told you in my earlier weekly roundup class that a special liquidity scheme for NBFCs was announced by the government. What was the maximum limit? For 30,000 crore, government has pledged securities and it has created a special purpose vehicle which has sold securities to the Reserve Bank of India, and in return Reserve Bank of India has transferred 30,000 crore. So that was because of this program. Unlocking liquidity. Considering the current uncertainties, lenders remain concerned about borrowers' ability to repay. When lenders are not having trust on the borrowers about his ability to repay, they do not lend. That is happening exactly in India now. Banks are not trusting the borrowers, hence they are not providing lending facilities. Next. Therefore, the program, this loan from World Bank, will support the government's efforts to channel liquidity. That means to enable micro, small, medium enterprises get access to formal credit. Channel liquidity to the MSME sector by de-risking lending. Why de-risking? Because government is providing guarantee to the lenders that we are here, in case he defaults, government will repay. From banks and non-banking financial companies. So it is de-risking lending from banks and NBFCs to MSMEs to range of instruments called credit guarantees. Last week I have told you this point at length. Strengthening NBFCs and small finance banks. Small finance banks were established based on the recommendations given by Nachiket More committee, and the objective of small finance bank is two objectives, important objectives. What are they? One, to encourage rural savings and to provide lending facilities to small business houses, migrant laborers and micro, small, medium enterprises. These are the two objectives of small finance banks established based on the recommendation of Nachiket More committee. The program will address the urgent and varied needs of the micro, small, medium enterprises by improving the funding capacity of key market oriented channels of credit. Try to understand. Here you got micro, small, medium enterprises. They receive funds from NBFCs and small finance banks. Governments provide security to these financial institutions. Only then these institutions provide credit to micro, small, medium enterprises. So between NBFC and micro, small enterprises, there is a government that is acting as a guarantor. This will support the government's refinance facility for NBFCs, non-banking finance companies, and in parallel, the International Financial Corporation will provide direct support to small finance banks through loans and equity. So this is how you enable or infuse liquidity into these financial institutions through which you can provide loan facilities to micro, small, medium enterprises. Enabling financial innovations. That means these currently only about 8% of MSMEs are served by formal credit. I told you about the major challenge faced by micro, small, medium enterprises is access to institutional credit. See the statistics. Only 8% of MSMEs in India, they get loans from formal institutions. What about 92%? They rely on money lenders at high interest rates. They are served by formal credit channels. The program will incentivize and mainstream the use of financial technologies called fintech and digital financial services in micro, small, medium enterprises lending and payments. Next, I have given you information regarding what are the agencies that are under World Bank group. So this is about some prelims related information useful for what is the way forward. How does we proceed about micro, small, medium enterprises? The sector is central to India's growth. Why it is central? Because it offers huge employment and its contribution in exports is also so high. India's growth and job creation. It will be key to the pace of India's economic recovery post-COVID. If India want to register better growth rates post-COVID impact, then revival of micro, small, medium enterprises is inevitable. Next one. The financial support by the World Bank is a part of reforms that are needed to propel the MSME sector, and Indian government has announced 3 lakh crore collateral free assistance or sovereign credit guarantee under Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan. This is in addition to what Indian government has already announced under Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan. So either ways, Government of India in support with World Bank Group want to uplift and revive micro, small, medium enterprises. However, the immediate need, what is the immediate need, is to ensure that liquidity infused into the system by the government is accessed by MSMEs. The first and foremost need immediately to revive economy is provide credit to micro, small, medium enterprises. And equally important is to strengthen the overall financing ecosystem for micro, small, medium enterprises. Next topic is Forex reserves for economic stimulus. Generally, if any country is having enough foreign exchange reserves that can be used to pay for 6 months of import bill. Try to understand. If government's forex reserves are sufficient to pay for 6 months of imports, then you say that the position of the government related to forex reserves is very good. Okay, now recently India's forex reserves have crossed $500 billion, that means 500 billion. In 2001, I think the forex reserves of India were somewhere around 42 billion. See the change from 42 billion in 2001 to 500 billion in 2020. So over $500 billion, that means $500 billion was India's forex reserves, placing India only behind China and Japan. In Asia, not only in Asia, in the entire world, China is having huge forex reserves, and in Asia, second rank is occupied by Japan and the third rank was occupied by India. I'll show you in a form of flowchart just now. While forex reserves amounting to import cover of 6 months is a good sign for any economy, today's cover is enough to sustain imports up to 12 months. So, India today is having enough forex reserves to pay for its imports for the next 12 months. Very, very good sign. Now, therefore, so economists have suggested that 6 months for import bill, if country is having enough forex reserves to pay for 6 months of country's imports bill, that is very good. Since India is having huge forex reserves which are sufficient to pay for 12 months of imports bill, why cannot India use that excess forex resources to instill revival in the economy? That means they are suggesting to use additional forex resources as a stimulus package in the economy. Let us see the advantages and disadvantages behind this suggestion. Many economists are of the view that using a small portion of these forex reserves for launching another economic stimulus to help support economic growth post-COVID pandemic. So this was their suggestion. Next. However, over-reliance on forex reserves to provide economic stimulus may prove to be danger for the economic stability of Indian economy. Before utilizing excess forex reserves as a stimulus package to revive economy, we should understand why India has witnessed increase in forex resource. I'll give you 2 reasons. 1. Russia versus Saudi Arabia. These countries are fighting on price of crude oil. Because these countries are fighting with each other in determining price of crude oil price came down. This is the reason for increase in forex reserves in India. Second reason, foreign institutional investments are flowing into country. Second reason for increasing forex reserves is foreign institutional investors. You call them as hot money. You call them as FII. It is more volatile in nature. It is not permanent like foreign direct investment. Unlike FDI, foreign institutional investment is temporary, volatile in nature. So foreign institutional investors are investing hugely in Indian market. That is how foreign currency is coming. That is how your forex reserves are increasing. Second reason is crude oil price is decreasing. These are the two reasons behind India having $500 billion in its forex reserves. Now, therefore, many economists are of the view that we can use a certain portion of this forex for reviving economy. Now, what will happen? Over-reliance on forex reserves to provide economic stimulus may prove to be dangerous for economic stability of Indian economy. This is true. Why? I said foreign institutional investment is called as hot money and it is volatile. They come to India, they invest heavily, and within no time they pull back their investment. So we have to pay back. And today, crude oil price is low. If there is, try to understand the impact. If there is $1 increase in crude oil price, India has to pay 15,000 crore rupees. $1 increase in the price of a barrel of a crude oil leads to forego of 15,000 crore. So, yes, today we have got huge forex reserves, but we should not rely more on those forex reserves and use them as part of stimulus package. Now, look into the details. Reasons for surge in forex reserves. Why forex reserves increased to $500 billion? First one, the recent rise is a result of two factors. One, spike or increase in foreign institutional investments. Second one, savings in India's import bill. First is this, second one is why savings? Because global fall in fuel prices. Why global fall? Because reduced India's oil bill, allowing it to save forex reserves. When price of crude oil is declining, naturally India has to pay less for its imports. Case for leveraging forex reserves. Adequate forex reserves, first point. Sufficiency of forex reserves is very good. But according to RBI, if forex reserves are sufficient to pay for 6 months of import bill, India's position is very good. Fine. And India imports cover is enough to sustain 12 months. So this point is arguing that why cannot India use its additional forex reserves for economic stimulus package? Next one. Then adequate contingency arrangement. In case of a credit shock, India can mitigate any balance of payment crisis situation as there are sufficient arrangements for foreign exchange reserves. How? You can get loan from IMF, and already India is having currency swap agreements with countries like Japan, etc. So what are the arrangements? A credit line from IMF India can get, and central bank liquidity swap agreements with countries like Japan. So these are adequate contingency arrangements made by the country. Next one. Leveraging forex as a last resort. Why? Tax revenues will be affected. Generally, tax revenues, both direct tax revenue, indirect tax revenue, will be affected in this financial year because of COVID. They will remain subdued as RBI has already given a huge dividend payment to the government in India. Already, Reserve Bank of India has paid a huge dividend amount to the government in 2019. Next one. Further, in mere 2 months into this fiscal year, and the government's fiscal deficit stands at, this is very important to understand. Financial year started in April. Already the government fiscal deficit is 58.6%. This is the position of central government, and few state governments are witnessing a further worse situation than this. So, as a result of accelerating its budgetary spending to deal with the virus, thus the lack of considerable space both on monetary and fiscal front. Either ways, there is no space for the government to accommodate measures to address COVID-19. Then government has left with no other option but to take some of the forex reserves and instill that into the economic revival. So the part of country's forex reserves can be used. So these points are providing evidence for why government should use additional forex reserves to revive the economy. Dangerous side of leveraging. Now, why government should not use the dangerous side of relying more on forex reserves? A single oil price hiccup can derail India's economy. How? Currently, low crude oil prices are due to several issues like price war between Russia and Saudi Arabia, and as soon as common ground is agreed, that means as soon as these two countries come to an agreement, then they will increase the price of crude oil. Then what will happen to India's import bill? Generally, whenever there is price war, price of crude oil comes down. Whenever there is an agreement, price goes up. When price goes up, you have to pay more on your import bill. As soon as common ground is agreed between the two countries, the crude prices will tend to rise. This will happen for sure. Next, with the rise of $1 per barrel of crude oil prices, what is the impact? India has to additionally pay nearly 15,000 crore. Now, given this situation, can India use its additional forex reserves to revive economy? It cannot. And India cannot rely more on hot money, that is foreign institutional investment. The rise in current forex reserves is due to massive inflow of FIIs. So this is about the dangers of using that. Therefore, the current surge in forex reserves should not be treated of permanent nature. You cannot rely on them. In March 2020 alone, foreign institutional investment in India fell by 65,000 crore. So they are highly volatile. Suddenly they pull out their investment and suddenly they invest their investment. So this happens very frequently, and this is the nature of foreign institutional investors. Now, positive effect of high forex reserves on foreign inflows is they will help India to maintain its global rating. That is one advantage. Because of this global rating, you can address your foreign investment inflows like permanent nature FDI, etc. Now, one more issue that we need to understand is volatility in Indian rupee. Reserve Bank of India has been fundamentally using foreign exchange to ensure rupee stability, and today, unfortunately, Indian rupee is the worst currency in entire Asia because of its instability. So, on one hand, Reserve Bank of India is using its forex reserves to bring stability in Indian rupee. Given the fluctuation in Indian rupee in comparison to the dollar, the Indian rupee has become one of Asia's worst currencies. Hence, RBI will be needing enough forex reserves to bring stability. That is why you cannot use additional forex reserves to revive economy. So all these are evidences to not use forex reserves to revive the economy. Now, economic stimulus is ineffective without structural reforms. So it says that rather than utilizing additional forex reserves to revive economy, you better bring in structural reforms in the economy to revive the economy post-COVID pandemic. And like what? You bring reforms in land acquisition, address delays in projects, clearances like environmental concerns, etc. By doing this, you can revive the economy. So, to end this topic, if the government intends to use forex reserves as an emergency fund, it should ensure that they do not shrink just when they are most needed. Apart from it, there is a need for separate attention to carry structural reforms in the economy to pull the Indian economy from slowdown. I have given you some pictographs how India's see today the forex reserves of India are $501 billion, and see the China forex reserves $3,100 billion, Japan 1000, India 502. So this is about the rankings. Next topic is new national logistics law. So why it is in news? Ministry of Commerce and Industry is considering to change the Multimodal Transportation of Goods Act 1993 with a new law. The new law is called National Logistics Efficiency and Advancement, Predictability and Safety Act. Pretty long to remember. The earlier law provides for regulation of multimodal transportation of goods from any place in India to any place outside India. Now, What is multimodal transportation? It is nothing but combination of modes of transportation. It can be road and rail, rail and air, waterways and roadways, etc. Any kind is called multimodal transportation. Now, it was introduced. Why this multimodal transportation of goods was introduced? To facilitate the exporters and give them a sense of security in transporting their goods. What was the objective of this new act changed by Ministry of Commerce? It wants to streamline the logistics ecosystem in the country with a view to promote growth of the sector. You will be surprised to see the impact of logistics sector in India. You know the size of logistics sector in India? It is somewhere near $160 billion. And by 2021, it may reach to $250 billion. And by 2022, logistics sector can become a largest employment provider in India. Currently, as of now today, it employs somewhere around 22 million people. See the scope of logistics sector in India. The size of the sector is $160 billion. Very soon it may reach up to $215 billion. And how many people are employed in logistics sector in India today? Around 22 million people were employed. And very soon it may become the largest employment provider in India. So this is the potential of this sector. Now, aim is to streamline the logistics sector in India. Next one, modernize and formalize logistics services and promote digitalization in the sector. These two are very, very crucial for improving logistics performance index. To reduce the logistics cost from the present 14% of GDP to less than 10%. Always we must bring down the cost and we must quicken the process of cross-border trade. That is how your logistics sector performance is evaluated. Reasons behind new law. Why do we need new law? The new law tends to define various participants of the logistics sector and create a light regulatory ecosystem. There is no clear definition of logistics sector in the old act. Next one. The logistics sector with a market size of, just now I told you the market size. What was the size? $160 billion. With more than 20 government agencies, 40 partnering agencies, etc. You don't have to remember all these figures. Try to understand that it has got huge potential and the current value is around $160 billion. And today it employs huge human force. 22 million people are working in logistics. What is the advantage? Effective implementation of this act would help provide an impetus to trade, enhance export competitiveness and improve India's ranking in the logistics performance index. Currently, India's rank is 44. This logistics performance index is given by World Bank. And India's rank is 44. And which country occupies the top rank in logistics performance index? Germany, Sweden, Belgium, Austria and Japan. These are top 5 countries. Now, logistics performance index. The index developed by World Bank Group is an interactive benchmarking to help countries identify the challenges in their logistics sector and to improve their performance. The index is weighted average of countries' scores on 6 key dimensions. These 6 key dimensions are useful for preliminary examination. What are they? First one is efficiency of the clearance process. That means how quick you are clearing the documents, like speed, simplicity, predictability, etc. Second one is quality of trade and transport related infrastructure like ports, railroads, roads, information technology, etc. The third element is ease of arranging competitively priced shipments. Next one is competence and quality of logistics services. Next one is ability to track and trace consignments, timelines of shipments and reaching destinations, etc. These are all the 6 important elements used to measure logistics performance index. They are important for preliminary examination. Now the rank of India in 2018 is 44. Now, what are the steps taken by the government of India to improve logistic performance index? First one is infrastructure pipeline. Other one is Bharatmala, Sagarmala, dedicated freight corridors, inland waterways, all these are programs initiated by the government of India to improve its logistics sector. So this is about logistics sector performance in India.
This video is brought to you by AKSIAS.